Hey guys, Tao Turns here, finding flow on a board. For today's video, we're going to start riding towards our nose. So this is the second step after learning how to stop and go across one edge. We're going to start to piece those together and ride towards our nose and start to link turns. So let's get into it. As a review from our last video, there's 3 different ways we can move our hips. We can move them from edge to edge by bending our hips, sitting in a chair and kind of pushing into the back of our boots. Or we can push our belly forward and lower our knees down so we're pushing our shins into the front of our boots to tilt our snowboard. Tilt more or tilt less, like this. We can also bend one knee to move our hips towards the nose, or bend our back knee towards the tail, depending on if you're regular or goofy. And we can also point our lead pocket in a certain direction by rotating our hips, like this. So in our last video, we were talking about how there's 2 different pocket arrows. In this video, we're going to get rid of that back pocket arrow and only focus on our lead pocket arrow. So there's only one. So get rid of that back one. If I'm regular, there's an arrow coming out of my left pocket. And if I turn my hips and maybe lower this knee down or this hip down, I can turn onto my toe side or my heel side. Cool. So once you've learned how to side slip and floating leaf, then we're going to jump into traverses. So a traverse is basically traveling across the hill. And we don't need to jump right into edge changing just yet. We're going to edge change while sitting on the ground. So what we can do is, just like our floating leaf, we can start on our heel side, move our weight towards the nose, make it real heavy by bending our front knee, pointing our pocket down the hill, and we can ride over here. And then I can turn across, come to a stop on my side slip. Let's say if I want to go right, I'm not trying to go backwards. I don't want to go towards my tail, right? So what I want to do is sit down, roll over. So now my nose is pointing in front. My nose is leading, right? So when I stand up on toe side, by putting my hands in the snow, picking up my knees, and walking my hands towards my toe edge, then I can travel this way. So just like the toe side floating leaf, I'm going to make my nose real heavy by bending my front knee, pointing my pocket down the hill, and I can ride my edge to traverse over this way. And then I can point my pocket across, come back to center to my toe side slip, sit down, roll over. So I'm always going towards my nose. I'm just going to make my nose real heavy by bending my front knee, pointing my lead pocket down the hill a little bit to go, pointing it across, coming back to center, so I can go back this way again. And this is what I want you to do. As you're learning how to go towards the nose, we're just going to change direction from right to left by sitting down and rolling over. Heels over here. And toes over here. Whew. And as we're doing this, as we're traveling across the hill, we can start to get the nose to point more downhill. So when we eventually make our edge change, when we're going across, and we're going to go from, let's say, toe edge to heel edge, which is the easier one to start with, we got to point our nose straight down the hill in order to get our edge to change or to roll over to that new edge and turn the other way. So in order to do that, we can try and do some garlands. So garlands are a great practice for getting our nose to point down the hill and then bring it across back to a side slip before we go for that full S-turn, where we point down the hill, change our edge, and turn the other way. So what we can do is the same thing where we're traversing across the hill, but we can put a little more weight on our nose, almost release the edge, just let it go, and start to slide down the hill. Because if I unbuckle my snowboard and push it down the hill, it's gonna want to point straight, right? It wants to go that way. So if I just release my edge, make my nose heavy to make sure that that's the side gravity pulls down to lead first, then I can just let it go straight. And then what I can do is use my front leg to steer rather than the back one by either lowering my front knee down for toe side, like this, or lowering my front hip down for heel side, like this. So we can start by using our front leg and then ending with both legs. So let's say for heel side, I'm gonna go across the hill, well, starting to point down the hill, and then bring it across by lowering my left hip first to turn, and then both hips to come back to that side slip to come to a gentle stop. And the slower I move my body, the better. So I'm gonna make my nose heavy, let the board point downhill, and then I can lower my left hip down to turn, and then both hips down, so I come back to my heel side. We can do this again, and at your own pace, we can progressively get the nose to point straighter before we bring it back across again. So you don't have to point it all the way straight right off the bat. We can maybe start a little bit diagonal and then come back across a little bit more until it's all the way straight. And then we can bring it all the way across. Now let's not go into an edge change just yet. Let's sit down, roll over whenever we're changing direction, so we can do it this way. So I'm going to make my nose real heavy. This time I'm lowering my front knee down first, and then both knees. Because on toe side, I use my hips by extending them and using my knees to lower down, rather than bending my hips and lowering my hips down that way. So what I'm gonna do is get my nose to point straight downhill, and then bring it back across. We can try this over and over again until we understand how to point it down and then point it across. So once we've practiced some Garlands, where we can point our nose down the hill and bring it back across to the same edge a couple times and build that muscle memory, then we can try a C turn, where we go from one edge to the other. It's gonna be a little easier to start on your toe side and turn to heels. Generally, it might be easier to do the other way for some people, but I'd recommend starting on your toe side. And all we're doing that's different from the Garlands is we're moving our hips to the other side of the board and then turning the other way. We've already practiced pointing the board downhill and bringing it across. We just have to either bend our hips to move to the other side of the board, or extend our hips from bent to get to this side of the board. Let's try it. I'm going to start on my toe side riding this way, make my nose real heavy, and point my pocket down the hill until I bend my hips and bring it across. And then heel side is very similar, just a little trickier because I can't just turn my body up the hill like that. I need to make sure my nose is leading and following along so it doesn't get left behind by me just trying to turn my shoulders up the hill. So that's how we're focusing more on our hips and knees, because our shoulders could be doing a whole different thing than what our lower body's doing. So don't just turn and face up the hill. We gotta look over our nose, keep our eyes looking in the direction our nose is going. So we can go this way, make the nose heavy, so the nose points downhill, And then I can do that toe side Garland over here. And then from there, we just point down the hill, change our hip edge, and bring it across. Nose downhill, extend our hips, bring it across. Nose downhill, bend our hips, bring it across. And one important thing to remember is our nose needs to point straight downhill for us to be able to change our edge the easiest on a mellow slope. Because if I try and go, say, from heel to toe, and my nose gets to here, when I go to my new edge, I've already caught and fallen over. So I gotta make sure that I point my nose straight, because now there's no uphill or downhill edge, and I can roll over to the new edge. So it might help to count to 3 1,000s to get my nose point straight, and then I can move my hips like this. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, bend, and the other way. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, extend, bring it across. Another common problem with S-turns is we might over-rotate. So let's say if I go from heel over to toe, and I keep turning all the way around, now I'm spinning down the hill, like this. So if that happens, that just means your board is too flat at the finish of your turn. Because our edges are what help us to stop turning. If my board's flat and I just keep pointing my pocket and turning all around, I'm gonna keep turning until I can tilt, get my board on an edge, because tilting is what stops that turning from happening. See, once my edge is locked in, it's stuck, it doesn't go anywhere. But, same thing, if I turn, like, get my board to point down the hill, and I tilt too early, like here, now my edge is locked in, and I can't get the board to turn anymore. So it's really a matter of figuring out our timing, of not tilting too early where we get stuck, and not tilting too late where we're over rotating and now we're going backwards and forwards. So just make sure we're flattening our board to turn it, and then we're tilting our board to stop it from turning. So we can go here, we stand up a little taller, point the pocket, heavy nose, and then come back to center, tilt the board at the end. All right. And that's how we can turn our snowboard. Cool. Thanks for watching, guys. In our next video, we're going to be talking about different turn sizes and shapes to get across different types of terrain. So make sure to comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.